call to the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, it won't shock you to find that I oppose this motion. I do say it's a great privilege to be able to stand up and give a speech on this motion, since it didn't seem for a while that even the opposition was going to support their own motion. But truthfully, I'm actually glad that the member for Bruce has done so, because it gives us an opportunity to address some of the fundamental problems coming from the member for Newcastle. And the member for Newcastle—
Now that was cruel.
ended her speech, I should say, more clearly by saying that the, quote, neoliberalism bogeyman experience has come to get everybody, that there is no benefit to actually making sure that institutions can actually be run by the private sector. You know, I was asked recently, rhetorically I might add, Deputy Speaker, in an article whether there's ever been a bigger capitulation in terms of public policy in Australia about somebody who was using a particular example. And I highlighted to them, yes, there was, against ideology, and it was the Labor Party. That party, which is committed to the socialist objective, was the one that privatised Qantas and the Commonwealth Bank. Now, don't get me wrong, I think they got it right, Deputy Speaker. But according to the member for Newcastle, they got that wrong. And this is why they can no longer claim the mantle of the Hawke-Keating legacy, because they're even abandoning the idea that they think that a private bank is a good idea. Maybe they're digging former Prime Minister Chifley from the grave and trying to resurrect the idea that everything should be nationalised and banks should be taken in public hands. Exactly, and as my knowledgeable colleague makes the point, there are services that are so critical that they cannot possibly be run by the private sector. Food and agriculture is a classic example. But we know actually that when food is put into the hands of the socialist means of production, it doesn't lead to bounty. It leads to breadlines.
Come on, Venezuela.
That's right. And Venezuela, you know, their great success story in oil is one of many ways to bankrupt a country. So this motion is a farce from beginning to end. In fact, the motion itself almost makes me want to look up parliamentary practice and House practice to understand what is the formal definition of misleading the parliament. Here is the reality. The Commonwealth supports a number of public servants to do a job to enable the government to do its job and to assist the people of Australia. It's an entirely reasonable thing to do. Of course, you don't need to constantly increase the number of public servants in perpetuity. There are entirely reasonable, logical reasons that you would outsource activities because skills or knowledge might sit outside of the public service. Believe it or not, an all-knowing perfect government does not exist. We might have division of labour. We might realise that there are advantages because some skills may only be needed for a short time. Or you might be able to purchase certain types of contracts. The logic of the opposition is that the government should essentially do all, because in the end, those skills must rest within the public sector. But instead, this government looks at taxpayers' money, makes rational, reasoned decisions about what's best value, what will enable the public service to do its jobs properly, and to deliver for the people of Australia. And so we don't believe in the unending increase in the public service. We agree in it doing its job well, resourcing it well, to deliver for the people that we are all elected to represent and serve. So we take a very pragmatic approach, but it doesn't work for the ideologues on the other side of this chamber. Because let's face it, today the modern Australian Labor Party simply does not represent working people. Today, it is the party of public sector workers and organised capital. And that is the basis in which everything they fight for in this chamber. You can talk about tradies these days, and frankly, the Labor Party won't say a word, Deputy Speaker. People who are organised independent contractors, they're not interested. But start criticising or saying there should be some sort of constraint on the public service and watch the outrage. If you really want to see them angry, Deputy Speaker, just ask them about industry superannuation, and then they will lose their nut, because in the end they only represent their own interests. They're only representing the people who pay for the memberships, and as we've seen in Victoria today, we've seen just how extensive that patronage network and their voter motivation is.